Have you ever had the feeling late at night that something in your room wasn't quite right? Maybe it's just a fleeting thought, easy to brush aside with logic. But the longer you sit in silence, the more it gnaws at you. The shadows in the corner, the faint creaks of the walls, the strange sensation that the air itself is heavier than it should be. You tell yourself it's nothing. But what if it isn't? What if right now something is watching you just out of sight? This isn't a nightmare you can wake up from, and it's not your imagination. Let me tell you a story. It started on an ordinary night. A young woman, let's call her Emma, lived alone in a small studio apartment. She had moved there less than a year ago, drawn by the charm of the quiet neighborhood and the feeling of privacy. It was nothing fancy. A bed in one corner, a desk near the window, and a single closet off to the side. She loved the simplicity of it, her space, her sanctuary. But the little oddities started a few weeks after she moved in. At first, there were objects slightly out of place. Nothing big, just small details she could explain away. A cup she thought she'd left on the counter turned up in the sink. A sock on the floor she was almost certain she had put away. On one occasion, she swore the closet door was closed when she left, but when she came back later, it was open just a crack. She blamed herself, forgetfulness, stress. But soon, the little things became harder to ignore. One evening, returning home late after meeting friends, she noticed her window was open. A cold breeze swept through the apartment, carrying the faint smell of outside air. She froze. She never left her windows open. She always kept them locked. Immediately, her eyes darted around the room for signs of a break-in. But there was nothing. Nothing missing. Nothing damaged. Still, she felt that undeniable twinge at the back of her neck, that instinctive sense that something was off. She locked the window, double-checked the front door, and tried to shake it off. But she couldn't. That night, as she lay in bed, she tossed and turned under the mounting weight of uneasiness. She felt exposed, like her apartment wasn't hers anymore, like something else had claimed a small piece of it. She eventually fell into a shallow, restless sleep. Then the whispering began. It was faint at first, just a low, indistinct noise Emma couldn't quite make out. She dismissed it as noise from outside or the creak of old pipes in the walls. But over the next few nights, it grew louder, harder to ignore. It came at odd hours, mostly late at night, when everything else was still. It wasn't constant either, just a brief murmur that would vanish the second she tried to focus on it. For the first time in her life, Emma began to feel real fear. After a week of this, she started keeping the lights on in every room. She bought heavier locks for the windows. She avoided sitting in silence, always keeping some noise in the background, a radio, her laptop, the sound of a TV show she wasn't watching. Anything. But fear has a way of creeping in, no matter what you do. It was a Saturday night when things escalated. Emma woke suddenly, her heart pounding for no reason she could identify. At first, all she could hear was the faint ringing in her ears and the sound of her own breathing. Then she noticed it, the quiet, deliberate sound of footsteps. Not outside, inside. She froze, her ears straining to pick up every detail. The steps were slow, heavy, as if whoever or whatever was walking didn't care whether she heard them or not. They stopped at her bedroom door. She lay perfectly still, her fists clenched in the tangle of bedsheets. Seconds dragged into what felt like hours. She wanted to scream, but fear locked her voice inside her throat. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. And then, though she didn't dare look, it came closer. There was no sound, no footsteps anymore, just that oppressive feeling that something was near, standing beside her bed. It stayed there, silent and unmoving. Emma doesn't remember falling asleep. All she remembers is waking up to sunlight streaming through the blinds. At first she thought, or prayed, that it had been just a dream. But as she shuffled her way to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face, she saw something. At the base of the doorframe, just beneath where she had heard the footsteps stop, were 5 long, faint scratches, not deep enough to break through the wood, but unmistakably deliberate. From that moment on, her fear turned into obsession. She scoured her apartment in the daylight, looking for any sign of intrusion. She combed through every closet, every drawer, and every corner. She checked the locks over and over again. She even kept her windows tightly shut, no matter how hot and stuffy the apartment got. For a while, weeks maybe, it seemed to work. Nothing happened. But the peace wouldn't last. Emma had just started to relax when, one night, the whispers returned. They seemed louder now, more animated, almost angry. This time, she swore she heard them forming words, rhythmic and chanted like a prayer she couldn't quite decipher. And then, one night, she saw it. The clock read 3:12 a.m. when she woke. Groggy, she sat up to take a drink of water, but then she froze. Across the room, near her bedroom door, was a shadow darker than any shadow should be. It wasn't the lack of light. It was the presence of something else. She blinked, fighting the instinct to scream. It didn't move. She stared at it, her heart pounding furiously in her chest until the subtle creak of the floor jolted her back to her senses. She grabbed her phone, its glow illuminating her shaking hands, but the moment she turned on the flashlight, the shadow was gone. Convinced it was her mind playing tricks on her, she decided not to speak of it to anyone. But 2 days later, in a corner of her closet, she found something she hadn't put there. A folded piece of paper. Her name was scrawled across the front in uneven, childlike handwriting. She ripped it open with trembling fingers. On the inside, written in looping, repetitive sentences, was one simple message. I see you. The shadows, the whispers, the scratches, they were all real. And they were far from over. Even after Emma moved to a different apartment, she always slept with the lights on. Her story isn't an isolated one, and it never really ended. Because if there's one thing about shadows, it's this. They're never truly gone. They're just waiting. So tonight, when you turn off the lights, take another look before you settle in. That shape in the corner, the one you've told yourself is just a shadow? Don't look too closely. You might not like what you see. And whatever you do, don't blink.